Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me for another restful episode of true, scary stories to help you fall asleep. Today, we're going to be reading true, scary vacation and travel horror stories. I hope you enjoy them. So, without further ado, lay back, relax, and enjoy these true, scary stories. The whole thing unfolded today. Cops were involved. I almost had a panic attack. It was a whole mess. So I'm on a trip backpacking around Europe with my brother, currently in Paris. We're staying at this hostel and we're in a 10-bunk bedroom. There was this one guy in the room who was immediately super weird. Almost right away, like as soon as we got settled, he starts talking to us about flying to Libya. He's all, us, Libya, fly tomorrow. And me and my brother are just like, nah, dude. He keeps saying it. We keep saying no. And he's getting progressively more assertive about it. As me and my brother are going around doing sightseeing and stuff, I keep seeing this dude around. When we're at the hostel, he kept following us to the dining hall, out onto the terrace, and I'm getting more creeped out. My brother, ever the non-assertive soul he is, just laughs it off like the dude is joking. This goes on for 2 days. Well, this morning, we were going out to get breakfast, and I forgot my phone back in the room. So I told my brother to just go ahead and I ran back to get it. I go in the room and the dude is sitting there. There's no one else in the room, and I honestly contemplated just leaving it. But I didn't trust it alone in the room, so I planned to just grab it quickly. That morning, he was still going on about Libya and was essentially bending over our beds going on about it, despite me repeatedly telling him to stop talking to us. I go in and grab my phone when he suddenly just yells, "Libya, now, now, we go now." I'm very scared, since at this point we are the only ones in the room, and I just say, "Screw off, dude," and I go to leave when he blocks the door and grabs my shoulder, still going on about going to the airport and flying to Libya. I shove past him and run away to where my brother and I were going to breakfast. I decided that we were going to switch rooms because this dude was officially creep level 100. We make it back to the hostel, and before we make it to the front desk, we went outside for a smoke and he shows up. I almost yell at him to leave us alone, and he flat out says no. I go to the front desk and explain that this dude has been harassing us and we wanted to change rooms. I mention what went down in the room, and before I know it, the cops were called and I was giving a statement. As they were sorting it out, there were a couple things that jumped out at me. 1. This guy didn't pay in advance. Normally, when you're staying in a hostel, you pay the full amount up front, or if you're staying a while, you pay weekly. He was paying by the day. 2. He had several pieces of ID in his wallet, none of which matched his description. Apparently, Paris had been having a problem with human trafficking. This guy was escorted out of the hostel by police. He was banned from staying there ever again. Me and my brother switched rooms and were given vouchers for free dinners for the rest of our stay here. And now, I'm terrified to go out by myself. I swear, if me and that guy had been alone in a more secluded place that didn't have cameras everywhere, I could have been shipped off to Libya. So, creepy guy from the Paris hostel, let's not meet again. I was around 15 or 16 years old at the time. I'm currently 18. And my mom, dad, and I were on a family trip to New York City. It was a really good trip at first. We visited the Statue of Liberty, Madison Square Garden, Times Square, etc. And for the most part, it was a normal vacation. But towards the end of our trip was when everything went to crap. It was our last day there, and we were trying to get back to the airport, so we decided to take an Uber. A couple minutes passed and a gray Civic pulls up to the sidewalk that we were on. I remember noticing that he had a Lyft and Uber stickers on his car, in multiple places almost excessively. It kind of felt like he was trying to prove that he was our Uber. It was just a small thing, but looking back, I really wish that I took more concern about how sus this guy really was. Moving on, we were running late, so I'm guessing that my dad didn't really pay attention to the license plate, because this guy was definitely not an Uber driver. He was a lanky African-American man wearing clothes akin to rags, and looked like he was drugged out, but at the time nothing seemed off to us. Again, we were running late, and what happened was the least of our expectations. The ride was normal until we got to the airport. We all expected him to get off the highway and let us off, but he didn't. Instead, he casually continued down the highway, past where we wanted to be dropped off. This was when my dad noticed that the man didn't have a meter or his phone set up with the Uber GPS open. We were starting to get worried, and my dad asked him in a stern voice, "Excuse me, where's your meter?" The man stayed silent. Flustered, he asked once more, this time yelling, "Where is your meter?" Again, no reply. But at this point, the man started dashing down the highway, weaving past other cars and driving very dangerously. We were all panicking. My dad was screaming at him to let us off. My mother was crying and praying with her rosary clutched firmly in her fist, and I was in shock. I froze up. I couldn't even cry or scream as much as I so desperately wanted to. I was completely immobilized. This continued for a while, driving down an unfamiliar road to God knows where, with the car only getting faster and faster. I started having those classic end-of-road type thoughts, like holy crap, this might be it, and there's nothing I can do about it. But luckily we were saved. I don't know if we passed by it, or if someone in a car we passed had called the cops, but we soon heard sirens blaring behind us, and we were being tailed at high speed by multiple police cars. One of the cops had a megaphone or something to amplify their voice, and screamed out for the man to pull over. Obviously, he put up a fight, and the police had to actually cut him off for him to finally stop. The police helped us out of the car and got all of our things from the trunk while putting blankets around us and telling us that it was going to be okay and that we were safe. At this moment, I felt the biggest wave of relief wash over me that I have ever felt in my life. Don't get me wrong, it still messed me and my family up pretty bad, and I was still left pretty traumatized, but I was at least glad that me and my family were alive and safe. The police gave us a ride back to the airport, and everything went as planned from that point on. But holy crap, am I glad that I never had to find out where this guy was taking us, and what he was planning to do with us. Just thinking about it still gives me goosebumps. I guess the moral of this story is to always check the license plate before going on an Uber or Lyft. That feature on the app that tells you what it is exists for a good reason. Last week, my boyfriend, a 20-year-old male, and I, a 19-year-old female, took a trip to Mexico for our anniversary on the 20th. Let it be known that we speak a fair amount of Spanish, enough to get us around comfortably. We started in Playa and moved to Cancun to hopefully get better beaches without as much seaweed. We took taxis many places, including from Playa to Cancun, an hour drive, and had no issues. On our anniversary, Thursday the 20th, we went out and did normal daytime in Mexico things. We then went home and got ready for an evening out. We decided to go to a place called Toro Rojo because they are known for their super nachos, and boy, do I love nachos. So we take off walking, because according to the maps, it's not far. We walk and walk and walk for 45 minutes, and I check the time on my Google Maps. and it says it'll be another hour walk or a 5-minute drive. It was a pretty major highway that we were walking on. We decide to hail a taxi because honestly I was in a rush for super nachos and daiquiris. The taxi pulls over to the side and we hop in. We tell him Toro Rojo, and he says he doesn't know where that is. So we hand him my phone with Google Maps pulled up. To get there, you needed to go straight and take a U-turn, and it would then be on the left. So he starts driving down this highway, and I'm watching over his shoulder. We're getting closer to the U-turn and he does not slow down. We pass the U-turn. I assume, okay, maybe he missed it. I've done it myself 1,000 times before. He keeps driving. He passes another U-turn, and another, and I start to worry. I take my boyfriend's phone and type. He keeps missing the U-turns. Tell him it's the other way. In Spanish, my boyfriend tells him to go the other way to get to the restaurant. The guy keeps driving faster and faster, 40 kilometers over the speed limit now, and says, "Mi inglés es no bien." My English is not good. He keeps driving and driving, passing U-turn after U-turn. I start panicking. It's hard to breathe. When I hear my boyfriend tell the guy, "Aquí es bien," here is good. He keeps driving. My boyfriend yells this time, "Aquí es bien." The driver finally slows down and I leap out of the car. The man demands $30, which my boyfriend gave him happily, and we took off sprinting the other direction. We look on maps and he took us 9 miles outside of the city, so we are now 12 miles from our hotel. There's nothing around us except blackness and trees. It's 11 p.m. Thankfully, I could call my mom and dad, and they talked to us while we walked. We were walking, trying to get ourselves to a hotel, so we could pull cash out. The taxi driver took most of our cash, and get an executive taxi. It was an hour walk to the nearest hotel. We were walking, and suddenly, this red Mini Cooper starts slowly following behind us. They roll their window down and drive next to us, but don't say anything. At this point, we were both so on edge. My boyfriend smacks the side of the car and screams, "Chupa mi pájaro," suck my you-know-what. They finally speed off and away from us. Soon after that, we are coming up on 2 stray dogs, and my boyfriend mentioned, what if they aren't friendly, and grabbed 2 rocks just in case. This broke my heart, as I am pre-vet, but, safety first. These dogs ended up being amazing, and only wanting pets. So, we pet them a bit and keep walking. Maybe 20 feet after these dogs, this red truck drives up next to us and asks taxi. It was an unmarked car, not a taxi. We tell him no and wave him on. He does not start to drive away, and suddenly these dogs come running and jumping at the car, barking so meanly. We run the other way because I trust a dog's intuition. We finally made it back to the hotel and got back to our hotel safely. But frankly, I'm scared to go to Mexico ever again. Back when I was 16, I had a rough time with my father and his girlfriend for about a year or so. Long story that isn't really related to this. But I was trying to mend my relationship with my father, because before all that I had always been a daddy's girl. So when I was offered to go on vacation with them along with my siblings and step-siblings, I said yes. After having thought about it long and hard for a month. We went to Turkey. We would be living at an all-inclusive resort that was aimed at Scandinavians, so a lot of people we could talk to. The first few days were perfectly fun. I was swimming in the sea and the pools at the resort. Only creepy thing there was a waiter who grabbed my hand and slipped me a napkin with a message of meeting up with him. He spent the next couple of days lurking around me every time we would go to eat, until my father saw how uncomfortable I was and told him to buzz off. Yay, Dad. But one day, my stepmother decided that we should take a girl day of shopping, which meant my sister, my two stepsisters, her, and myself. I didn't really like the idea, but I decided to come along anyways. So off we went to the nearest bazaar. We spent about an hour there until we got to a small place that looked really sketchy, but they seemed to have some clothes that my stepsisters wanted to look at. So we went inside. I remember there were 3 men there, 2 older ones and then a young one in the beginning of his 20s. He called himself Oscar. I remember because that's the name of my dog. We were seated and they brought out Turkish tea and such to make us feel at home, while we were looking at dresses and the like that they wanted us to try on. In the end, I was pressured into trying one on and went to the dressing room. While I was there, Oscar came and asked if all was well. Thinking that it was just good customer service, I answered that I was fine. He might have understood something because he slipped into the dressing room, and before I could do anything, he had me cornered with his hands on my cheeks and leaned in to kiss me. My body froze, despite my brain telling me to scream and punch him. It took me half a minute before I managed to pull back and tell him to stop. I pushed him out and changed faster than I ever have. Luckily, I was wearing a dress as well, so it was easy enough. Once I got out, I asked my sister if we could leave, whispering what had happened. She nodded and had to force my stepmother to get her butt in gear. She was enjoying all the compliments. Once out of there, my stepmother was scolding me for making a scene. My sister told her what had happened because I was a sobbing mess. Stepmother's reaction? She grabbed my arm hard and said, "Do not tell your father," before she let go and marched out of there. I didn't feel like leaving the room the rest of the vacation, and stupid as I was, I didn't want to make my father angry, so I didn't tell him. To this day, he still doesn't know what happened, and to this day, my stepmother is still angry at me for ruining that vacation. So Oscar, from that creepy shop, I hope you get what you deserved, but let's never meet again. So a few years ago, my boyfriend's dad's family decided to get together and all chip in to rent a condo in Ontario and get together. There was a big, extended family over there that his dad never saw, because he only really got along with one of his 3 sisters. My boyfriend's mom had talked him into going though, and they let me tag along, because I'd been around long enough that they liked me and trusted me. I can't remember where everyone else had gone. I think it was to the beach for what was probably like the 3rd time that day. It was just me and my boyfriend at the condo, because we were kind of sick of the beach and just wanted to do nothing in the shade for a while. We were sitting outside, looking over the water and just kind of talking about life. I had just finished reading the Harry Potter series, so we were just kind of talking about that for a bit, when this woman comes out of the brush beside the condo. Just for an idea, this condo was about an acre of land maybe, and it was kind of out of the middle of nowhere. The front of the condo was probably 70 feet from a dirt road that no one traveled down really, and there were some dense trees and brush and whatnot that surrounded 3 sides of it. This woman comes out of the wooded area, and I immediately knew that something wasn't right. She was limping, and she only had on 1 sandal, and frankly she looked like crap. She was pale, and her face was gaunt. She was really, really pretty, but she just looked exhausted. The thing that immediately caught my attention was her baby, who she was holding pretty tightly in her arms as she started coming towards us. I didn't really know what to do, but my boyfriend immediately got up and walked over to make sure that she was okay. I couldn't help but think of all these awful things that might happen after spending so many hours hearing these horror stories on Reddit. I was just terrified that she'd do something. My boy is a lot more trusting than I am though, and he's always had the instinct of what's the problem and how can I help. He's never assumed the bad in anybody. So this woman is just sobbing by the time she gets to the porch of the condo, and she looks like she's just been through a war zone. She's shaking and hyperventilating and crying, and she's telling us that basically her boyfriend has been a drunk for a while, and he's been getting worse and worse, and he's been an overall abusive guy. He'd get angry whenever she was focused on the baby instead of him, and part of what made him angry and set him off was that it wasn't his kid, so he kinda didn't care about the baby at all. She told us how this time in particular he was drunk, and she was driving him home with the baby in the back seat, and he grabbed the baby's booster seat and tore it out of the car and threw it out of the window while they were driving. She got the baby out of the seat or something. I don't remember how, because as she's telling us about how he started hitting her before she took the baby and ran, we hear this yelling, and we turn and see this angry dude walking up to the condo, and she starts losing it. Drunk and angry, this guy followed her to our condo and was starting to come up to us. He was trying to act like he wasn't angry. He was doing a, "Oh, you guys found her, thank you so much. Baby, let's go home" kind of thing. But he was slurring his speech and not doing a good job of hiding how angry he really was. My boyfriend has always been a pacifist. Honestly, he's even kind of a pushover. He's really non-confrontational and tries to find a way to talk stuff out and come to an agreement before doing anything. But before I could even say anything, he's across the yard and approaching this guy. As much of a pacifist as he is, he's also huge. He's built like a football player. He's 6'3", and at the time he was 230 pounds. I've known my boyfriend since we were 10. At the time we were 20, and we'd been dating for just over a year. I knew him better than anyone. He's never done anything like this before, but he goes up to the guy and goes, "Not another step, dude," and he's shaking as he says it. The guy tries to walk around my boyfriend and goes, "No, it's okay. I'm just gonna take her home." And my boyfriend steps in front of him and shakes his head. "You're drunk," he said, "so I'm gonna pretend like maybe you didn't get what I just said. Don't come any closer." At this point, the guy stops trying to pretend, and he says something like, "You don't know what's going on. That's my girlfriend. I'm gonna take her home." And he tries rounding my boyfriend again, and one more time my boyfriend blocks him and says, "Stop." I've never heard this tone in his voice before or since. It was scary. It wasn't him. The guy tried one more time before my boyfriend finally put his hand on his chest and pushed him back a bit, keeping his hand on the guy's chest. "I'm telling you right now, you're not going anywhere near that girl and her child, so turn around and walk away." This guy was about 5'6", maybe 5'7", so when he looked up to threaten my boyfriend, he had looked like a kid. The guy finally looks up at my boyfriend, and he says something that I couldn't hear. My boyfriend said something back, and then the guy stared at him for a moment, like he was deciding whether or not to do anything. My boyfriend finally pushed him away, and the guy stumbled back, and then started pointing at me and the girl as he was trying to say something. And then he started to walk away. I didn't learn till the next day, but the guy had told my boyfriend that he had a gun and that he was coming back, and that he'd kill him if we stopped him again. My boyfriend's response to that changes depending on who's telling the story. Originally, he told me that he told the guy that he'd feed him his own teeth, which made me laugh because he's such a dork and he got that from a movie. And ever since then, the line he tells everyone is, "I'll be waiting." The woman was sobbing, the baby was sobbing, and I was shaking because even though he didn't throw any punches or anything, I could tell that he was ready to hurt this guy if anything else had happened. We called the police, and they didn't really do much of anything outside of make sure that everyone was breathing and take the girl to her sister's place. We didn't really hear much from her after, but I know my boyfriend sent her an email once or twice, and she's married now to someone else and had another kid last time they talked. It was a really nice trip, despite that one part. I was on an overnight ferry and got up in the middle of the night to use the toilet. They were like communal, if you know. So I had to go out of my room and a few doors down a hallway. When I was done and stepped back out to the hallway, a man turned the corner, and me, being a young kid, got some bad vibes from that dude. So I didn't walk back to my room until I knew that he wouldn't know which room I was in. I started walking faster and faster away, and he just followed me. At some point, I started running, and finally turned a corner back to where my room was. I looked back and could hear that he was far behind and out of sight, so I quickly got into my room and locked the door. I just sat with my back to the door in complete silence and heard him running past the door. I did not sleep much that night. I was around 12 years old. We were fishing in the middle of a lake when my cousin hooked me in the forehead with a triple hook barbed spoon lure, feathers, and pork rind for bait. My uncle detached most of the lure, but couldn't get the hook out, so I had to go to the ER in a tiny town. I came in with my hand over the hook. The triage nurse asked what was wrong. I removed my hand and she just said, "Oh." After I sat in the waiting room for a while, a resident came out, said I was making the other patients uneasy, and put a sheet over my head. Once they took me back and a doctor examined me, he asked for a scalpel blade. I thought he was going to cut my forehead open to get at the hook, but he just needed to remove the pork rind. He numbed me up and pulled the hook out rather aggressively. I had to get a tetanus booster. I have a needle phobia, and I had to get stuck twice that day. My mom and aunt are still laughing about it more than 30 years later. A few years ago, I went on vacation with a friend to a resort in a popular spring break area. Although I was the typical spring breaker age, I avoided people my own age, and instead hung out at the adult pool bar. My friend and I frequented this bar every day, and became friendly with the bartender. But the bartender became a little too friendly with me, and would occasionally flirt and blow kisses at me. I took these gestures with a grain of salt, and saw that it was a way to get more business. But his gestures went too far at one point. The pool bar had a public restroom right next to it, so one day after having a drink or two, I excused myself from my friend to use the restroom. While going to the bathroom, I heard the door open and someone enter a stall. I didn't think much of it until I went out to wash my hands. The restroom was really dark, which made this situation even scarier. While washing my hands, I heard one of the stalls open behind me, and I looked up into the mirror only to see the bartender come out of one of the stalls. Besides him, I was the only one in the bathroom. At this point, every siren in my head was going off, but I was in so much shock that this man would follow me into a woman's restroom that I didn't know what to do. At this point, he tried to talk to me, but I dodged him and ran out of the bathroom. My friend later laughed it off, but I never went back to that bar. I should have reported his behavior to the resort, but I was in so much shock that I didn't. When I was younger, each summer and almost every New Year, my family would pack the car and go on a trip to visit family in Mexico. We never had any problems until one particular trip when I was 8. Like every road trip before, we left our home in North Texas around 6 p.m. in order to reach our destination the next morning. So around 2 a.m. we crossed into Mexico, and that's when things got weird. When you're on the only stretch of freeway in the middle of the desert, you don't tend to freak out about having the same car behind you for miles. It was practically pitch black outside with our car windows, the only visible shapes being the dotted stars and the eerie silhouettes of the cacti. We'd been in Mexico for about an hour and still have a few more to drive. And I remember sleeping, but still being semi-conscious of what was going on around me because I didn't have the skill to really fall asleep in a car. So when my mother suddenly spoke my dad's name, I heard her. Miguel, that car behind us, it's been behind us since we left Laredo. My dad peeked at the car, shrugged off my mother's tension. A lot of cars use this road. He's probably going to Reynosa or another city, and he left it at that. Despite his sureness, my mom kept a wary eye on the car behind us. By this time, my siblings and I were hyper aware of the car and entertained ourselves with watching the car through the gaps in the luggage that blocked the rear window. We got tired pretty quick. He's getting closer, my mother noted, and we turned to watch as the car inched closer and closer to ours. He's too close, Miguel. And she was right. By this time, the car was practically pressed against the rear of our car, and on a lonely stretch of highway in the middle of nowhere, with another few hours until daylight. It was downright crazy. We couldn't do much. My dad didn't slow down, didn't stop, and he didn't speed away either. He just drove, and the car followed. The next 30 minutes were the most tense we had ever experienced. The car would ease off sometimes only to press its blinding headlights against our rear once more, like he knew that he was freaking us out and enjoying it. It was during one of the periods that the car had pulled away that my mom spotted a police car up ahead, parked on the side of the road, and she didn't miss a beat. Pull over, right in front of the police. Pull over now, Miguel. And he did. And the car kept driving. I wonder how confused the policeman must have been as he watched my dad park our car right in front of him. The policeman came over and asked us what was wrong, and my mother urgently told him everything. The car, the way it followed us and taunted us. The policeman took her claims seriously and told us of how people were victimized and had their cars stolen on these empty highways by thugs and criminals. And then he offered to drive behind us for a while to make us feel safe. We drove with the police cruiser behind us, relieved, until about 10 minutes later when we saw something that confirmed the policeman's words and my mother's worst fears. 10 minutes later, we saw the car pulled over on the side of the road, waiting. Like several other posts on this subreddit, this happened to me when I was a kid, 10 to be exact. I grew up in a military family and lived on the Middle East for a significant portion of my life. Because of this, we frequently traveled to different countries because of the low cost and proximity. On this particular vacation, we flew into Cairo, Egypt, the kidnapping capital of the world at that point in time, for a long weekend. We only lived like 2 to 3 hours away. It was late at night, and we were staying at the Marriott Hotel, which had a taxi and shuttle service that was supposed to pick us up. For some reason, our driver never showed, so we were forced to find a regular taxi to take us there, which took forever to find that late at night. We finally found one that was offering us a pretty good deal. They don't run by meters, instead they just give flat rates that they choose, and headed towards the hotel. Out of nowhere, another taxi basically T-bones us in the middle of the road, causing us to stop. There aren't really defined roads in a lot of Arab places, so it isn't really that surprising that we got hit. In Arab nature, the two drivers get out of their cars, each yelling that it was the other's fault, and looking like they were going to throw hands. Eventually, they got back into their respective taxis and parted ways. My family and I were completely taken aback. We had been in Egypt for less than 2 hours and have already had quite the adventure. We finally got to the hotel, exhausted as it must have been 3 a.m. by this point. Our driver helped us get all of our bags and we got settled, and told us that he felt so bad about the car accident that he offered to pick us up the next morning and take us to the Great Pyramids, which was on our agenda, for a super cheap rate. My parents agreed and decided on a time for him to come, though I can't remember when. Flash forward to the next morning. Everyone is ready for the day, excited to see how crazy it was going to be. Our driver was outside waiting for us, leaning against the car like someone in an old movie, right when he said he'd be there. I'm a blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl that had a deep tan at the time, and being in Egypt, that was a rare sight. When the driver saw me in the daylight, he gave me the creepiest, most unsettling look that sent chills down my spine, even as a 10-year-old. I knew that something wasn't right with him. Nonetheless, we got in his taxi and headed towards the pyramids. He continued to try and talk to me and joke around with me the whole ride, something that I found to be extremely creepy and bold since both of my parents were in the car. We get super close, and there is an entrance that people can go through and walk the long distance to the pyramids, and there's an entrance that taxis can go through. You have to pay to see them. Strange but true. Our driver keeps making jokes about my blonde hair and blue eyes, and bringing up that he could get me into the pyramids for free, so my parents wouldn't have to pay the extra ticket price. We laughed it off and my parents paid him, said thank you, and began to exit the taxi. I don't remember how it happened, but at some point after I got out of the car, he did too, and directed me towards his trunk. I was confused and thought we had forgotten something, so I stayed behind as my parents walked towards the gate to get whatever I thought we had left. The driver pops the trunk, but there wasn't anything in it. He grabbed my arm and put a hand on my back, trying to push me into the trunk, and said, "I'm getting you in for free," over and over again as I resisted. Naturally, I freaked out and screamed out to my mom and dad at the top of my lungs, terrified. When they heard me and noticed that I wasn't behind them, they started sprinting back to the car. When the driver heard me scream, he immediately let go of me, closed the trunk, and drove away, just as my parents started to run to me. I was crying my eyes out, terrified out of my mind, knowing that an Arab taxi driver tried to put me in his trunk and drove away the second I screamed for help. It's scary to think what could have happened to me had he been stronger and more prepared, or faster. He's the reason that I'm still terrified of taxis, Ubers, Lyfts, and any car service of that nature. So, Egyptian taxi driver, let's never meet again. When I was around 15, a family friend offered to take me and my mom to Seabreeze after he won tickets at work. It was awesome because he spent from open to close riding all of the fun rides, like the Quantum Loop with me while my mom relaxed, bought me overly priced drinks and food, and even bought me silly souvenirs. It was without a doubt one of the top 5 trips to an amusement park for me. Well, like 2 weeks later, we learned from his sister he was arrested for a string of robberies, along with murdering an elderly woman who robbed a little while before he took us on the trip. Nobody could believe it until he pleaded guilty and was sentenced. He seemed like such a great guy, loved his family, gave money to charities, took his friends on expensive trips, which now we all know how he could afford it on a cashier's salary. All in all, a seemingly great guy. It just shows that even the most normal-seeming people can sometimes have vomit-inducing skeletons. This story is so weird that I almost pushed it out of my mind, but my friend reminded me of it last night, and now I'm creeped out all over again. I was around 15 or 16 years old, and I was on vacation at Walt Disney World sometime during the summer. My family has the vacation club membership, so we go a few times a year and live close by anyway. We were staying in the vacation club villas, which is a separate building from the main hotel. I brought 2 of my friends, Savannah and Victoria, and we got bored at around 2 a.m., so we went down to the gym. It's open 24 hours. We weren't even going to work out, Just take mirror selfies and mess around with the exercise balls. There's a desk for the spa portion of the gym, or maybe it's a sauna, I don't really remember. But since it was so late, there was no employees, so we were messing around behind the desk and found a notebook. I'm not sure why. I was super annoying at the time, but I decided to write my Twitter and Instagram handles, and so did Savannah. Looking back, I'm pretty sure that we could get in trouble since guests aren't supposed to screw around with the desk. I didn't think much of it and we left the gym. And the next morning, we checked out of the hotel. On the drive back home, I get a Twitter notification, and it's from a diaper fetish account. The creepy thing is this account was active for a while, and had disgusting pictures of grown men in diapers and other disturbing pictures of children. So does Savannah, and we both sat there looking at each other like, what the heck? The account tweeted at us saying something like, "I know who you are and what you've done, and your vacation will end abruptly." They tweeted some more creepy stuff like telling us to watch our backs, but I knew that it was clearly because we left our names on the notepad. I didn't write back. Then I noticed a new follower, and it was my name, but the username was similar to the diaper account. The account started tweeting my address, my phone number, and random pictures of me from deep within my social media. They do the same thing with Savannah's name, and at this point we're both really scared. I get a text from a random number. I'm assuming they used a texting app, saying what they were watching us and knew more than we thought. They even started texting me about my boyfriend at the time, and asked me some really messed up questions about him. I told them to screw off and blocked it. I didn't get any more texts, but the Twitter account continued to tweet about me, and random details that I knew they had to dig deep to find. I blocked them on that too, and put all my accounts on private. I never got any more messages, but the Twitter accounts are still up to this day. So, to the Disney employee with a diaper fetish, please stay far away from me. In the mid-90s, my parents took my older brother and me on vacation to Cancun, Mexico, when we were teenagers. Me 13, my brother 18. My brother and I shared a room, and he was old enough to go out to the bars, leaving me alone in the room to watch movies and be bored out of my mind. My parents wanted to hang out with us the whole time, but we were too cool and tried to distance ourselves from them as much as possible. I was mature for my age, had previously had some underage drinks with friends, and felt that I was old and cool enough to go to the downtown parts of Cancun. When I asked my brother if I could join him, he laughed at me and told my parents, so I was bitter that I was stuck back in my room, or worse, forced to hang out with my folks. The third or fourth day into our vacation, I was sitting at one of the hotel bars, nursing a Shirley Temple and feeling sorry for myself. A woman, nicely dressed in her mid to late 20s, sat down next to me and we started chatting. I don't remember the details of what we talked about. I just remember her being really interested in what I had to say, and she made me feel like I was really mature for my age, what 13-year-old me really craved. We made arrangements to meet at the resort bar the next day to hang out some more. The next day, we met in the resort lounge at lunchtime and hung out. She listened to my stories about how BS it was that I couldn't go out drinking, and sympathizing, she offered to get me alcoholic drinks. 13-year-old me wanted screwdrivers. After 3 to 4 drinks, I was getting pretty drunk, and this was when she asked me if I wanted to go back to her room to hang out and watch a movie. Drunk 13-year-old me thought this was a great idea, as I was going to get more booze, and this cool 20-something chick wanted to hang out with me, and thought that I was super cool. Just as we were leaving the lounge, my mom appears. She was meeting my dad at the pool. Mom doesn't know what's going on, thinks I'm heading to my hotel room. Drunk me proudly introduces my new friend to my mom, telling her that we're going back to the woman's room to watch a movie. My mom's face goes from "Hi, how's it going?" to "Get your butt up to your room right now." My mom tells my new friend that she has no business inviting 13-year-olds back to her room, and that she is not to talk to me again or my mom will call the cops. At that moment, I was so angry with my mom, but she had that don't mess with me look that I knew that I had to keep my mouth shut. The next day, I was heading out to the pool and saw that woman sitting at the bar with two men in their late 50s, who I can only describe as menacingly scary. She pointed at me, and one of the men glared while the other winked at me. It sent shivers down my spine. This happened about half a year ago, but finding this subreddit reminded me. So I get a message on a dating site from a girl. Not my type, but I check the message out. "Hey, you're super hot. Want to come over to my hotel room?" I was flattered, but definitely was not interested. However, she might be a good person, so I messaged her back. "Not really looking for that, but I'm down to chat." Her: "No, I really, want something else. I'm on vacation and I'm at hotel near my house." Me: "Once again, I'm very sorry, but I'm not interested. Where are you from, and why choose here to vacation to?" Her: "I live in the same town, but I'm at a hotel wanting to do stuff. Come over." At this point, I was sketched out. Why rent a hotel room when you live here? It's a smaller city. So I did the smart thing. I blocked her. I sent a message beforehand saying goodbye, and I hope she finds someone that is interested. Fast forward 30 minutes. She made a second account and sent me this: "I'm serious. I really want you to come over. Here's something to persuade you." A link to a picture that was a picture of her, naked in bed. So, I block her again. Not even 15 minutes went by, and there is another account and message from her. At this point, I think I'm getting trolled. My friends could easily pull this off. I wanted to call their bluff, so I created a new Kik account, gave my info, and told her to go on video. I was going to catch my friends. Well, it was her, and she quickly went into doing things trying to persuade me. I deleted the Kik and avoided it. Deleted my dating account. Was completely sketched out. About 2 months later, I reactivated it one lonely night. About a day later, I get a message from her saying that she saw me riding my bike downtown a few weeks ago. She described what I was wearing. I had enough. I told her that I could take this to the police for harassment. I didn't know if I had a good case, but I wanted to scare her away. It worked. I haven't heard a peep since. And I've never been more grateful to think with my brain instead of my other head. This is about last year, just at the start of October 2015. My dad thought that it was a good idea to take the family out for a little fresh air. I live in a small town, so nothing big happens except for the finish of Idiotrod. I'm just going to skip to the event that happened in Las Vegas. I'm 17 now, and I was 17 then, so seeing a new big city was always fun and very exciting. We had a reservation for this fancy hotel and casino called the Mirage. Fancy to me, at least. I was pretty bored in our hotel room, so I decided to pass time looking out the window staring at this vague volcano. I decided to go for a walk by myself and told my dad that I was going by this water show or something. While I was walking on the strip, I was passing Caesar's Palace, and there was a walkway where most people weren't walking though. Just a select random way most wouldn't take. This may not be so believable, but this random man walked up to me and asked if I had any money to lend. He was a bit darker than me and had a cap on, and was wearing a Jimi Hendrix t-shirt and was wearing cargo shorts. I responded nicely and respectfully. He approved, and we went our ways separately. After about a few minutes of sightseeing and looking around, I noticed the same guy slowly following me. as I continued into a pharmacy and bought a Rockstar and some kind of candy bar, can't remember. I noticed the same guy, but this time more of a distance away, so I decided to make my way quickly back to my hotel. After passing this water show that starts every 15 minutes or so, I did a check around. Pretty self-explanatory. I didn't notice him, so I kept walking onto the Mirage, which is now in sight. Walking distance to the front door of the Mirage, I hear, "Hey man," coming from behind me. As there were many people around, I just went on thinking it was to someone else. After a short walk through the weird stores, and in there I hear, "Hey yo dude," in the same voice. So I turn around and notice that he had asked me for some money earlier. I kind of felt bad lying to him, but I brushed it off because I didn't know him at all. As he was coming closer, I thought to myself, crap, too late to book it. So I went on with the very unnerving conversation. After some moderately friendly chat, he then asked again if I had some money to lend. So I pretty much thought that he saw me purchase my drink and candy bar, leading to the fact that I have change. After avoiding light questions like "got any change" and "can I have some money," I came in clutch and said that my dad was calling me. After I got off the phone with my dad, I finally found out the guy's name, Jerry. I knew it wasn't his real name because he hesitated for a good 4 to 5 seconds. I shook his hand and proceeded to the elevator, as fast walkingly as I could, as I can hear him jogging right behind me. I saw some ladies walking in a small group, kind of like how fighter jets fly. Best pilot in the middle, others slowly left and right, and I used my okay agility to sweep by and not get yelled at and managed to ditch him. And he started to run after me, but I made it to the elevator just in time, made it to my room and slept it off. So, scary dude, let us never, ever meet again. We were in Hamburg, Germany. On our last day, we went to the parking place where our car was, and driving out of there, a van had parked blocking the exit. Looking behind the van was like 8 guys with masks and guns about to do a full-on robbery, so we just floor it and drive around the van. Very weird experience. I went to Paris for the Japan Expo 10 years ago with my parents and a friend of mine. The last Saturday, she had a huge pain in her belly, was lightheaded, and a few other symptoms. We tried to go to the hospital, but the ER was closed. Tried like 4 clinics with ERs, but they were all closed too. The only one that was open had the on-duty doctor only arriving in the middle of the afternoon, when it was 10 a.m. Receptionist tried to call her until she got a hold of her because my friend was visibly in pain. The doctor made my friend explain what was going on the phone and sent us to another clinic to get some scans and tests. Turns out, one of her kidneys had shut down and she needed immediate medical attention. I was on my first road trip through Europe. Me and a friend were traveling extremely cheap for a number of reasons. We had terrible bank numbers, but we needed a getaway for a while. So badly, so whatever. We camped and slept in the car for most of the trip. We didn't have significant trouble. Maybe some homeless people or drunk bums forcing us out or landowners asking us to leave. But all good. Until one night in Romania, near Craiova, we set a tarmac in what seemed to be like a reasonably secluded stretch of woods and left the car 50 meters away. We woke up in the night because we heard some noises, and a random group of people were literally tearing the car apart by smashing it. We shouted and they began to chase us for a bit and then left. but we ran. We fled as fast as we could, slashed tires, reported it to the police, and sorted out the papers to scrap my buddy's car. They didn't even steal anything, just damaged the car to a point where it was a lost cause. We took buses and hitchhiked back home. I enjoyed Romania a lot, and I'll go back if I can, but I won't set foot in that city ever again. Crazy folks, I tell ya. Thank you so much for listening to all of the stories in this video. I hope you enjoyed them. I also hope that you enjoy the extra rain at the end. Get a good night's sleep, everyone, and I'll read to you in the next video. Bye-bye now.